Good morning, dear students. Welcome to the class. Hope you all are safe and fine. Let's recap what we have discussed in the previous session. In the previous session, we have discussed about reproduction in plants. Reproduction in plants takes place by fusion of male and female gametes, which involves two steps mainly, that is pollination and fertilization. In pollination, what happens? There is transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower, or maybe to the stigma of another flower but of the same species. Then we have discussed about self-pollination. What is self-pollination? Self-pollination, we have discussed, takes place in two ways. The first way we have discussed was there are chances that the pollen grains of the anther of one flower transfer to the stigma of the same flower. That means the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. That is self-pollination. Another way of self-pollination is the pollen grain may transfer from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So in that case also it is self-pollination, because the pollen grain is getting transferred to another flower of the same plant. That is why it is also self-pollination. Then we have discussed about cross-pollination. Cross-pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower. Means these two flowers must be of different plants but of the same kind. That means the plant is of the same species. That is cross-pollination. Then we have discussed that since the plants cannot move about, the agents are required to carry or transfer the pollen grains. The pollen grains may be transferred by wind, water, insects and animals. Then we have discussed about pollination by various agents. We have discussed that flowers like in case of rice, maize and grass, they are pollinated by wind. Then we have discussed about pollination in water. Pollination is brought about by water in aquatic plants. We have discussed about the example of Vallisneria. Then we have discussed about pollination by insects, which is very common among plants. Insects like bees, butterflies, wasps, beetles, etc. They all help in pollination. There are some animals too which help in pollination. These animals are birds, squirrels, bats, etc. Now moving on with the second step in the reproduction in plants, let us discuss about the second step. What was the second step? The second step was fertilization. And to understand the process of fertilization in flowering plants, let's first see all the floral parts involved in the reproduction in plants. There are 4 whorls in a flower. As we have discussed in the previous class about the different whorls of the flower, there are 4 whorls in a flower. They are calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. We have also learned that thalamus is considered to be the base of the flower, which provides the attachment place for the different whorls of the flower. The very first whorl of the flower is sepals, also called as calyx. It is the outermost whorl of the flower, and what is its function? It protects the flower during the bud stage. Then the second whorl of the flower is petals, which are generally brightly colored, and the reason why they are brightly colored is to attract the insects for pollination. Then the third whorl of the flower is androecium, which is containing stamen, and stamen has two parts, anther and the filament. It is considered to be the male reproductive part of the flower, and therefore we also call it as stamen. The male reproductive part is androecium, the stamen. Then the fourth whorl of the flower is gynoecium, which contains pistil or carpel. A pistil or carpel consists of three parts, that is stigma, style and ovary. So this makes the female reproductive part of the flower. We also call it as pistil. Now, here in this figure you can see, in this module you can see a bee is visible which is carrying pollen grains. So from where to where does it carry the pollen grain? It carries the pollen grain from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower. So this bee is an agent to carry the pollen grains from anther to the stigma. Now, when the bee is carrying the pollen, its destination is to give or drop the pollen grains at the target position. The target position is the stigma. It should be trapped by the stigma. Then only pollination will take place. Now let's see how it proceeds with the process of fertilization. I think you all are aware of this structure. What is this? Yes, this is pistil or carpel, the female reproductive part. It consists of three parts. The tip is stigma, the middle portion is called as the style, and the base part of the gynoecium or pistil is called the ovary. Now, when the pollen grain has reached the stigma, what happens to it? When the pollen grain, which you have seen in the previous module, which is brought by the honeybee, is reached to the stigma, is it that it remains there itself? No. It has to penetrate inside the ovary. So let's see how slowly these pollen grains penetrate through the style and reach the ovary of the flower. The pollen grains, when they are on the stigma of the flower, they are starting to develop pollen tube. So during pollination, the pollen grain comes to lie on the stigma. So that is the process of pollination. The pollen grain has come and it is reached on the stigma. After the pollen grain has reached the stigma of the same kind of flower, it starts germinating. Germinating means it starts growing. It starts germinating or it starts growing into a pollen tube. As you can see in this module, the pollen tube is increasing in size. So that means it is germinating. The pollen grain is germinating into a pollen tube. Now, this pollen tube grows down through the style, and slowly, as you can see in this module, the size of the pollen tube is increasing. In the previous module, it was grown a bit, and slowly it has grown more. So this pollen tube, it grows down the style, down through the style, and slowly it enters the ovary to reach the ovule. On reaching the ovule, the pollen tube releases the male cell or the male gamete in the ovule. Then what happens? Already in the ovule, what is present? The female gamete is present. Female gamete consists of the eggs, or you can say ova. So when this pollen tube reaches the ovule and releases the male gamete in the ovule, the male gamete fuses with the female gamete inside the ovary. The female gamete, on fusion with the male gamete, then produces the zygote, and this fusion of the male and the female cell or gametes is only called as fertilization. So what happens during fertilization? The fusion of male gamete with the female gamete. When a pollen grain reaches the stigma, it germinates or grows to produce a long tube. As you can see in this module also, the pollen tube is growing and it is reaching to the ovule, penetrating through the style. It is passing through the style and reaching into the ovule, and it carries the male gametes, the male cells. On reaching the ovary, the male cell present in the pollen grain unites or fuses with the egg cell inside the ovule, and after the fusion of the male and the female cell, what is produced? Zygote is produced, and this process of formation of zygote due to the fusion of male and female gamete is called as fertilization. Now what happens after fertilization? After fertilization has taken place, the ovule no more remains the same. It starts developing into a seed, and the ovary part, it no more remains the same ovary, but starts becoming the fruit, and the other parts of the flower, that is the sepals, petals, and the other parts, that is the style, stigma and stamens, all of it falls off. So let's see what happens after formation of a fruit. After fertilization, a number of events or changes take place in the flower. As you can see in the module, these changes are, as you can see, the ovary remains attached to the stalk. As you can see here in the module, this is the ovary part which has developed into fruit. So this is attached to the stalk of the plant, and this only continues to grow into fruit. The ovules in the ovary develop into seeds. It will be inside the fruit. The other parts of the flower, like sepals and petals, slowly it will rot and it will fall off. And also the style, stigma and stamens. It's of no use now after the formation of fruit and seed has taken place. That means after the fertilization has taken place, there is no role of petals, sepals, stamen, stigma, style or anything is not required. Only the required part is the ovary of the flower. That is the female basal part of the flower. So, we can conclude that the process of fertilization involves 4 steps. That is germination of the pollen grains on the stigma, penetration of the pollen tube into the ovary to reach the ovule, then fusion of the male gamete with the female gamete, and finally the process of fertilization take place in the formation of zygote. That is, the zygote is formed. Now, what do you see here? The beautiful, tasty, sweet fruits which are developed from the ovary of the flower. So therefore, we consider them as ripened ovary. Ripened ovary means fully developed ovary which is converted into fruit. We all love to eat fruits. Have you ever thought what actually is fruit or how is it formed? Well, now I think if there was any doubt about it, it must be clear as you have learned the process of fertilization. Now, by eating the fruits, what do we get? Yes, what do we get? We get vitamins. These vitamins are important for our body, though it is required in small amounts, but it is very important for our body. Why is it important? Because these vitamins help to boost our immunity, and this immunity will help our body to fight against diseases. Like right now, the whole world is under pandemic and many people are suffering from COVID-19. And if you have watched it on the TV, if you have heard the experts, they always say the best way to escape, not escape, but actually to stay away from COVID-19 is to boost up your immunity. If your immunity power is high, no virus can touch you. And if at all it touches you, your body will fight against it and you will win instead of the virus to win. You will not let the virus to win. So from now onwards, if you don't like all the fruits, start eating fruits thinking that it is a medicine which will help to boost up your immunity so that you can fight against the diseases. Well, moving on further, what is a fruit? As you can see, fruit is ripened ovary. It is a mature ovary. Most of the fruits are edible and they have high nutrition value. That means they provide us with high nutrition, those nutrients which are important for our body. So we consider fruits to be very, very important food for our body because they provide us with vitamins. Now let's talk in detail about the parts of a fruit. A fruit consists of three parts mainly. The exocarp, which is also called as epicarp. It is the outermost covering of the fruit. It is called as exocarp or epicarp. Then the middle fleshy part of the fruit is called as mesocarp. What it is called? It is called as mesocarp. And the inner part where the seed is present, which is the hard part of the fruit, it is called as endocarp. Now in this module you can see the different parts of a flower, of a fruit, that is exocarp, which is the outermost coating. In between, the middle part, the fleshy part of the fruit is mesocarp, and the inner part which surrounds the seed, which is coating the seed, is the endocarp. And all these three collectively they are called as pericarp. So what is pericarp? It develops from the wall of the ovary and it may be soft and fleshy. As you can see here in this fruit, it is not that fleshy, but if we talk about tomato or papaya, it's very fleshy, very soft. And if we talk about walnut, akroot, it is dry. So pericarp has three parts. What are the three parts? Exo or epicarp, which is the outermost covering. Center or the middle part is the mesocarp, and the innermost hard part of the pericarp is the endocarp, which contains the seeds. Now, the fruits are of two types based on the fleshy part or dry part of the fruit. The fruits are of two types, that is dry fruits or fleshy fruits. In dry fruits, let's see the examples. Here you can see the examples: walnut, maize. Dry fruits doesn't mean only the almonds or walnut or apricots. All these are only not the dry fruits, but all the fruits which are dry in nature. As you can see here, this maize, that is dry. Pea is dry. The sunflower seed, the sunflower fruit, that is also dry. So all these are examples of dry fruits. In these fruits, the pericarp is not fleshy. Let me show you in another module. Here you can see in the module that the pericarp is not fleshy. Instead, it is thin and hard. In case of walnut, the pericarp is not fleshy and it is not edible also. So, walnut is a dry fruit. Its pericarp is dry and non-edible. The edible part of the walnut is its seed. That means the edible part of this fruit is seed. There are many other examples like maize, gram, pea, wheat, paddy. These all are examples of dry fruits. Now moving on to the fleshy fruits, the second type of fruit. Here are some examples of fleshy fruits. In fleshy fruits, the pericarp or some of its parts are soft and pulpy. The best example you can see is in case of tomato or mango. You can see it in apple also. The edible part of it is soft and pulpy. So we consider these fruits as fleshy fruits, whereas in walnut the case was different. The pericarp was hard, it was dry, it was non-edible, and it was surrounding the edible part, that was the seed. But in fleshy fruits, the edible part is soft and pulpy. Then, moving on to the functions of a fruit. What are the functions of a fruit? The first function is protection. The second function is dispersal of seeds. And the third function of a fruit is storage of food. That is, it stores food. Let's see. The first function that we have discussed, I just now told you, is protection. Protection means the seed is protected from the animals and the unfavorable environmental conditions. Just suppose if there is no protection for the seed, what may happen? It may be eaten by the animals, or it may be affected by the environmental factors. So what is this fruit doing to the seed? It is acting as a protection for the seed which is inside it. It is protecting the seed from the animals as well as from the harsh climatic conditions. Then the fruit also helps in dispersal of seeds. Can you think how? Okay, let me tell you. When an animal eats any fruit, or maybe we only if eat any fruit, sometimes we throw the seeds here and there. For example, if you have eaten a mango and the seed of this mango is thrown by you somewhere else in the ground, in the ground. After some time, after some months maybe, you may find a plant growing out of it. So that means you have helped in dispersal of seeds, and also sometimes the fruits fall down. And when they fall down and if it is rotten, it is into the soil. So there also the seeds may sprout and it may give rise to a new plant. So the fruits help in dispersal of seeds from one place to another. It's not that the fruit which is growing in a plant, it will remain in the same place. It is carried to different places. It is transported to different places. So that means with the fruit, the seed is also transported. It is dispersed. So the fruits help in dispersal of seeds. Then the third function of the fruit is it stores food material. Yes, the fruit stores the food in it. That is the main function of the fruit. Now moving further, let's talk about seeds. What is a seed? A seed is developed from which part of the flower? Yes, it is developed from the female reproductive part of the flower. That is, it is developed from the ovule. After fertilization, the ovule converts or develops into seed. A fruit may have only one seed, like in mango, or it may have several seeds, like in plum, or in orange, or in papaya, or in tomato. In all these fruits, in all these fruits we find a number of seeds. It's not only that there is one seed. If we just ask your mother to cut a tomato for you, when it is cut, you can see a number of seeds inside it. So there are some fruits which have single seed. There are some fruits which have a number of seeds. Seeds also show a great diversity in shape, size and appearance. As you can see here in the module also, there are two seeds, a bit similar, but if I talk about these two seeds, they are different from each other. They are different in shape, different in size. Also, they are different in appearance. First, let's talk about the structure of the seed. The seed has an outer covering. As you can see here in the module, there is an outer covering, and this outer covering is called as seed coat. Then inside the seed coat, there is a baby plant which is inactive, which is in dormant state, which is in inactive state. This is called as the embryo, and this embryo is present inside the seed coat. The embryo of the seed consists of three parts. That is a plumule, as you can see here in the second part of the module, that it has three parts. A plumule which develops into shoot. When this seed is sown into the soil, after a few days, it may sprout and it will slowly develop into a small plantlet. So, this embryo part only, which was in the dormant state previously, when it is sown in the soil, it will start developing, and the plumule part of this embryo will develop into shoot. And the radical part, as you can see here, this is the radical part of the seed. So this radical will develop into root, and this complete cotyledon, this is the cotyledon. So the cotyledons store or reserve food material and develop into the first leaves of the plant. Now, there are two types of seeds. Seeds are of two types depending upon the number of cotyledons present in them. What is cotyledons? We have just now discussed. Cotyledon, this is the cotyledon. Cotyledon is the storehouse, or it stores the food material for the seed. So, depending upon the number of cotyledons, there are two types of seeds. One is monocotyledonous and the second one is dicotyledonous. We call it monocot seeds also and dicot seeds also. So the monocot seeds have one cotyledon. As you can see in this first part, it is showing one cotyledon. So the monocotyledonous seeds have one cotyledon. Therefore, we call it monocotyledonous seed or monocot seed. In the second part, you can see there are two cotyledons visible. The seeds have two cotyledons. So we call these as dicotyledonous, or they are called as dicotyledon or dicot seeds. Monocot and dicot seeds both have the same structure of the seed. There is a seed coat, an embryo is present, which made the upper part will develop into plumule, the shoot system, and the lower part of the embryo will develop into radicle that will give rise to root system. And in the cotyledons, there is storage of food material. Then now let's see how the germination of seed takes place. When seeds get suitable conditions like temperature, water, air and light. When all these conditions are fulfilled for a seed may germinate to produce a new plant. So, what happens in seed germination? Seed germination is the process by which the dormant or the inactive embryo in the seed becomes active and grows into a seedling, as you can see in the module. From a small seedling to a small plantlet. Slowly it grows, and this is only seed germination. Let's see the process of seed germination. Germination begins when the seed swells up by taking water. And this process of soaking or swelling up of the seed is called as imbibition. Then what happens to the seed? The seed coat ruptures, and from that develops the radicle. The radicle grows down into the soil and forms the root system, whereas the plumule grows upward in the air. Here in the first part of the module, you can see a small sprout is above the ground. So this is the plumule part of the seed which is growing upward in the air. It develops the leaves. Slowly it will develop the leaves and forms the shoot of the young plant. Initially, the food which is stored in the cotyledons. Where is the cotyledon present? This part. It is not the leaf. It is actually the cotyledon which has stored the food. In the previous part, we have discussed that cotyledons, they reserve the food material. What for? In this germination of the seed, during the germination process, the cotyledons provide this stored food to the developing embryo. So, the food stored in the cotyledons or the endosperm is used by the growing embryo. And slowly, the cotyledons will form the first leaves. As it is visible, it looks like the leaf. It is the first leaf. It says that it is the first leaf, but actually it is not the first leaf. It looks like the leaf, but it is cotyledons only. So, the cotyledons, they form the first leaves of the seedling, and then slowly the new leaves develop from the plumule to manufacture food for the seedling. Till the time this cotyledon is present, it will provide food to the growing seedling. But as soon as the work of this cotyledon gets over, its work will get over when the leaves have developed. Now, these leaves will start forming food for the plant. How? By the process of photosynthesis. So, the plumule which is above the ground, which is forming the shoot system, will slowly get all the food which is required for the plant through the process of photosynthesis. Then let's talk about the conditions which are required for seed germination. A mature seed germinates only on receiving suitable conditions. If all these suitable conditions are fulfilled, the seed may grow or germinate into a new plant. The conditions, as you can see, moisture, that is water. From the air, it requires oxygen mainly, and warmth provides favorable temperature. That is the right range of temperature. Moisture is essential for seed germination because water softens the seed coat and makes it burst open for the radicle and plumule to come out. If the seed coat will not burst open, the radicle and plumule will not arise. This is very important to note, that the plumule and the radicle will only develop when the seed coat is softened and it is burst open. When it is burst open, then there will be the way for the radicle and plumule to grow. Then water activates the embryo to grow. Water is helping the embryo, the cotyledons, to grow. Then water dissolves stored food and makes the enzymes to work upon the food so that it is available to the growing embryo. It's not that the food will on its own reach to the growing embryo, but this is water only which is a good solvent which dissolves almost everything. It will dissolve this stored food material also, and it will make the enzymes to work upon this food, and that food will be used up by the growing embryo. Then another condition required for germination is presence of air. During seed germination, energy is needed for growth, and this energy is released by the oxidation of food. Oxidation of food means by the breaking down of food, and this breaking down of food in turn needs oxygen. When oxygen is taken up by the seed, it will help in breaking down of the food and further in germination. Then the third condition is warmth, that is the favorable temperature. Some seeds, they do not germinate during summer. This you must have observed also, that you do not get all the fruits or vegetables in all the seasons. There is particular season for different fruits and vegetables. So during some, and also in case of flowers also, all the flowers, they do not grow in the same season. Seeds of summer flowers fall to germinate in winter. The main reason is because they do not get the favorable temperature. It means different varieties of seeds need different temperature range. For example, summer plants like rice, maize, millet, etc., they grow in a particular range of temperature. What is that particular range of temperature? That is, the temperature required for their growth is about 25 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius. They will grow in a better way in this optimum temperature. If they will get this particular range of temperature, there will be proper growth and development of the seed. Otherwise, there will be no proper yield. Then seeds which grow in winter, plants like wheat, gram, bean, pea, these all germinate during the winter season. So they germinate within the temperature range of 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. So the temperature required for the growth of wheat, gram or bean seeds is of the range of 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. So it's very, very important to know that a seed may germinate only if all these conditions are fulfilled for it. If the conditions are not fulfilled, there won't be proper germination of the seed. With this, we end up today's session. There is some home assignment for you. Let me tell you, the copy which you will be using for writing your answers will be the interleaf copy as you were using for general science in class 5. You will be using an interleaf copy which is ruled on one side and blank on one side. That means you will write the answers on one side and the diagrams will be drawn on the blank site, and you can get your answers on the school's website, that is at www.lfsraptinagar.ac.in. Stay blessed, stay safe, God bless you.